Labour votes, because after all they are a left-of-centre party. They're basically led by people who were socialists until they got it all wrong. And one or two of them weren't re-elected even at the last general election. So it's basically a socialist party, and we'd expect it to take socialist votes. The only snag to it, as far as we're concerned, is that we've got a number of key seats, of course, where they do run us fairly close. And in those cases, if the other socialists, the old socialists of the Labour Party, combined with them, well, it could cause us some problems.
Thank you both very much. We'll hope to come back to you later on in the night. Now, Martin.
Well, let's use that Cheltenham result, the details of that, to give you some idea of the geography of our election battleground here tonight. Now, up at the top, just below the name of the constituency, you'll find the winner in his or her party colours. Down at the bottom left, their majority, and over at the bottom right, the percentage swing that it took to achieve that, or that might have affected that. And here we see for Cheltenham, Charles Irving, 35, he's been in that seat an awfully long time. He is back home in Cheltenham. We note that his majority is down 7,000 to 5,500, that there is a swing to the Liberals of 6.3%, pushing them in the person of Richard Home, a close associate of David Steele at Liberal headquarters, into second place with 23,000 votes. And a lost deposit for Labour. Those little asterisks that you see there on the screen will always indicate that a candidate has lost his deposit. Now, Peter, can the beast, the computer, tell us any more about that particular result?
Well, I'll take a look. Let's have a look at the share in Cheltenham. The Conservative took 51%, the Liberal 41%, Labour 8%, and the Ecology Party 1%. The change in the share of the vote since 1979, the Conservative down 1.4%, Liberal up 11.2%, Labour down 10.6%, and Ecology up 0.8%. And that is almost an exact replica of what happened at Guildford, with the Alliance taking a vast bulk of their votes from the Labour Party, but not in sufficient quantities in a true blue seat like that to really knock the Conservatives over when the tide is running for them. And if that is the pattern all over the country, when we get a few good marginal results, what I think is you're going to see happening is that the Alliance intervention will cost Labour their marginals. But we can't really make harden up our prediction until we get a good margin or two, particularly in the north. And when we do, we'll see how our prediction moves. And just to remind you, in case you've joined us late, we are predicting a Conservative majority in the new Parliament of 116 over all other parties. Alistair.
Well, Peter, as you're saying, marginals will be different, but this must encourage Liberals in the south of England, in North Wiltshire, say, Mr. Stephen Ross in the Isle of Wight, Mr. Mole in Chelmsford, to think that if they can pick up this where the Labour Party is there to be squeezed, they could still do some damage to the Tories in the south.
Well, we're predicting Chelmsford, that they will take Chelmsford, but there's very little else around for them tonight on our prediction. And it's clear that from those Cheltenham and Guildford results that they're not actually squeezing hard enough on Labour to take the seats from the Tories. Mind you, there's not much Labour left to squeeze in those seats, is there?
There's nothing left in the Isle of Wight at all, I think, Peter. Just from Northern Ireland, of course, they won't declare the count there until tomorrow, but the final total there of arrests for personation at polling stations, that's people turning up and claiming to vote who haven't got a right to do so, is said to be 138. We'll go now to Dulwich, where I don't think personation is quite so high. Geoffrey Archer's there. Geoffrey.
I can't do anything with that.
We're going now, Geoffrey. We're going.
Well, here in Peckham Girls' School Hall, which was full of A-level candidates this morning, we've got three counts going on. We've got Peckham and Dulwich and Bermondsey. One of the closest results is likely to be in Dulwich. It was a Labour seat held by Sam Silkin with a very slim majority of just about 120 in 1979. It should, because of boundary changes and the national trend, by all accounts it should become a Tory gain. But there is a very strong challenge here from the SDP in the shape of Mr. Dick Taverne. He fought an election last year, by-election in Peckham, that failed to unseat the Labour candidate, but he is fighting a very strong case here, and he's trying to get back into Parliament. He's been out of Parliament since 1974, when he resigned from the Labour Party. So it'll be a very close race indeed in Dulwich. And in Bermondsey too, I see that the ITN poll is projecting that should be a Labour regaining Bermondsey from the Alliance. You remember that in the by-election last year, Peter Tatchell was defeated by the Alliance's Simon Hughes. Well, Simon Hughes has built up a considerable personal following here and may well be able to hold that seat for the Alliance. But we'll get our results probably around 2 o'clock in the morning. So by now, back to the studio.
And that gives me the chance to say that most campaigns go wrong and unstuck somewhere. Unfortunately, the cameras are often there too, and John Snow now explains.
A very nervous new candidate who was fighting his first election and was invited to go to the local mental hospital to address a meeting of the staff and the patients. And the head of the hospital took the chair. And the young candidate had just started to make his speech when a large man in the front shouted, "Rubbish!" This new candidate had never been heckled before. So he carried on, slightly shaken. And the man shouted, "I've never heard such rubbish." And he didn't carry on a bit longer. "Tripe!" the man shouted. He looked as if he was getting rather angry. And so the candidate turned to the head of the hospital, who was sitting in the chair, and said, "What should I do?" The head of the hospital said, "Carry on. It's the first time he's talked sense for years."
My wife seems to be particularly prone to encountering amusing incidents on canvassing. She knocked a woman's door once in Cardiff a few years ago, and the woman came to the door and said that her husband wasn't home, so she wouldn't be making up her mind. And my wife launched into a tirade of historical reminders about how women had to fight and indeed die for the vote. And the woman said, "Oh, no, there's nothing like that, love," she said. "It's the only bloody thing he does for himself, so I'm going to leave it to him."
And on the way down to this cul-de-sac, I could see this dear old Cornish fella giving me the eye. Anyway, I got there, my son and I had a look, and on the way back, he said, "Here, boy, you Penalliganary?" So I said, yes, I'm Penalligan. "You're the MP, boy?" So I said, "That's right. Here, boy, you's doing a handsome job." Now, there's nothing a politician likes to hear that, just more than that, just weeks before polling day. "Oh," I said, "thank you very much, it's very kind of you." "Yes, boy, handsome, best we ever had here." "Here," he said, "you Conservative, Labour, Liberal."
And finally, due to popular demand, the best joke from the last election.
Members of Parliament always receive many extraordinary letters, but perhaps one of the most extraordinary, and perhaps clearest, was one which I received after I had been elected as the new captain of the Royal and Ancient Golf Club at St Andrews. And I received the following letter from one of my constituents. It read as follows: "You were elected and are paid to look after my interests. This you have consistently failed to do for 16 years. Now I understand that you are to amuse yourself at my expense playing golf. I hope you will lose your balls."
Well, that is, as Martin was saying, the most popularly requested item on any election. Mrs. Thatcher's arriving at her count at Finchley.
Thatcher's just arrived in the car here. Mr. Thatcher, good evening. Are you happy with the way things are going? You happy?
Very few results yet. We heard the straw polls, which seemed all right.
It looked as though the Alliance vote is being taken from Labour and not from you. That presumably is something that makes you reasonably happy.
Well, we've heard 3 seats which are very, very similar. I think we want to hear a wider range of seats before we form any conclusions. It's a long night ahead.
Are you fairly confident?
Enjoy the drama of election night? I think, as I said when I just left number 10, it looks as if that will be our home for the next 5 years, and we very much hope so.
Looks as though your quiet confidence has paid off, perhaps.
I think perhaps so. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Hello, Mr. Thatcher. Good evening. Looks as though it's going your way.
I think so.
Mrs. Thatcher makes her way up to the count. She's been proceeding some time.
Yes, Mr. Jenkins, could you tell us, are you heartened or daunted by what we've had so far?
Well, I'm rather heartened by the results we've seen so far, though it would be very foolish to project a whole national position on the basis of 3 results. It looks as though we're doing a little better than the projections, but only what counts are the final results, and we'll have those in a few hours, so don't let's predict too much before we know what people have actually voted in the booths.
15% up in Torbay. Were you pleased with that?
Yes, very pleased indeed. But I also saw Guildford and I saw Cheltenham. And so far as the south of England is concerned, admittedly in Conservative seats, that looks quite striking.
What do you think of your own chances?
I'll know those in a short time. I'm now going down to see about them.
Thank you. Mr. Jenkins going off now to the Kelvin Hall in Glasgow, where he will see his own count, which we expect in about half an hour to 45 minutes.
And no doubt Mr. Jenkins remembering his most successful in the very final stages by-election campaign, which won Hill Head for him just over a year ago, before the Falklands War began. Well, we've heard now from almost all the party leaders except Mr. David Steele, and a short time ago Alistair Stewart, partly in the sky above Gabon in West Africa, which is the way we have to beam things from Ettrick Bridge, spoke to him. Mr. Steele said the campaign had been an uphill struggle for the Alliance, and Stewart asked him, did he think they'd managed to do what they had said they would set out to do, and that was to break the mould of British politics?
And I think that if we get a quarter of the votes of the electorate, which looks likely, and the Labour Party gets about the same, that will be really quite a remarkable achievement, and I believe we can say we will have broken the mould of British politics, because I think the 1983 election will mark the end of the Labour Party as a force in government. I don't say that with any relish. I think it's just a historic inevitability, and I think that during this next Parliament we have got to provide, however small we may be in numbers in the House, a new and effective opposition all through the next Parliament.
What, in your view, was the essential barrier then which stopped you from actually breaking through and standing a real chance of forming, in terms of parliamentary seats, the opposition?
I don't think the barrier was there during the election. I think that the fact that we had not sustained a high level of support right through the last Parliament, so that we began the election at around the low 20s, that was disappointing. I mean, to have to climb up from the mid-teens in the polls was not something that we had contemplated, and that made it very difficult. The barrier, of course, will come tonight with the electoral system. We ought to get, if we have a quarter of the votes, we ought to have, on any fair basis, something like 150, 160 seats. I very much doubt if we're going to be anything like that, and we will have to hope that the organisation will carry us through in the seats such as those I've been visiting, and I think I count now that I've been to 93 seats in the campaign, and I just hope that that turns out to be the case. But obviously I'll be bitterly disappointed if we end up with only fractionally more than we started with.
If within that number, be it fractionally more than you started with, the vast majority are Liberal members and only a handful of SDP members, what future then the Alliance?
I think that both the parties, the Liberal Party and the SDP, will want to stop and reflect on this election before coming to any instant conclusions about the future of the Alliance. On the good side, I think there's no doubt from what I saw that the Alliance was working extremely well on the ground in most of the seats that we visited. It was very effective indeed, and that was heartening. But obviously, if we ended up with a disproportionately large number of seats, that would cast some doubt, I think, in the minds of both parties as to how effective an alliance could be. We want to go on working together in the next Parliament, and I'm sure we'll do so, and the personal rapport between the leading Liberals and the leading SDP members has increased during this election, and I'm sure we will work together. But quite how the institution of the alliance will develop, I think, is a matter for the parties to discuss at their conferences in the autumn.
Well, Mr. Steele has set out quite an agenda now for the future of the Alliance, and his words there will be most important, and I've no doubt that the Social Democrats watching and listening tonight will have taken on board the meaning of what Mr. Steele said. Everything is now open, he appeared to say. He'd enjoyed his time with them. That had produced a good campaign, but it's failed to produce the results. And there is no doubt that there will be a post-mortem inside the Liberal Party as well as the SDP and, of course, the Labour Party. We understand there's a little kerfuffle at Wrexham. They are actually getting very close to a count there. But while we're waiting for that, I think we have a chance to talk to Mr. James Pryor, the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland, at his count at Waveney, and Mr. John Silkin, who's Labour's defence spokesman at Labour headquarters. We'll go first to Mr. Silkin. Mr. Silkin, are you in any way despondent about what you've heard so far tonight?
Well, there have been very few results that have come out. I think they put rather an interesting spanner into your computer machine. And what's clear to me is that an awful lot more people have decided they don't like the look of Mrs. Thatcher than you, for example, and all the other pundits thought likely.
Now, Mr. Silkin, is that an overture to Mr. Steele?
I don't know who it's an overture to. I know that it's not an overture to Mrs. Thatcher.
Mr. Pryor, what do you think of it so far?
Well, so far, from what I've heard, it's a very satisfactory result. One, of course, can't tell. It's too early yet, but I'm delighted with the result.
What delights you about the result? The Alliance are pushing you quite hard in the south of England.
Yes, I always expected the Alliance would, because the Labour vote has fallen away, and there's no doubt that on the council housing estates in an area like this, the Labour Party vote has fallen and the Alliance vote is up. And they simply haven't been, the Labour Party simply haven't been able to pull their people out till quite late tonight in this constituency. The Labour Party were making a big effort to get the council house vote out, and it simply wouldn't come. And I suspect that this is partly defence, partly the fact that we're prepared to sell council houses. All these things have contributed to a very big victory for the Conservative Party.
I think this is the prior interpretation of history. Let's just wait a little. The night is still very, very young. I have a lot of faith in my fellow creatures, more faith in them than in computers.
Well, Mr. Silkin, we'll see about the computer. No doubt it will answer back eventually. But you are, in fact, happy that Mrs. Thatcher has not achieved. Would you call this a landslide?
Would I what?
Would you call what is happening so far a landslide?
No, I would say that on the contrary, the number of the majorities in the extremely Tory seats that we've seen don't look very good to me. It looks as though the anti-Thatcher vote is much higher than was expected. And that's very interesting, because it's going to have other repercussions through the night.
Mr. Pryor?
Well, it may not be a landslide, but all I can tell you is that in the 8 elections I've fought, I believe that there has been a better welcome for Conservative candidates and what they have been putting across and what they stand for than in any other election I remember. It is better than 1959, which was the high peak of Conservatives since the war. And that is a great credit to the Conservative Party, and I think a great credit to the nation. And I don't believe now that one can say that we're not in for a great victory, because I think there is a great victory. What will now depend on what use we put that victory to.
But, Mr. Pryor, are you privately a little relieved that it's not a Conservative majority of 200 or something that's being forecast?
Look, Alistair, if you fight a marginal seat, you fight to win. I have always fought marginal seats. I can't be worried about whether it's landslides or not. I have to get every single vote out of this constituency. And I'm not commenting whether I want it to be a 200 majority or 100 or 50. The great thing is that you go out to win, and that's what we're doing.
Well, now, Mr. Pryor, of course, you won your seat in 1959, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
And so you have a comparison with the past. Mr. Silkin, your seat, some people have said, might be at some risk, because, after all, you have quarrelled with your left wing.
Have I?
Oh, yes, indeed, Mr. Silkin. Remember,
thank you very much.
Remember the Tribune
It's
newspaper?
always nice to get information.
Do you remember the Tribune newspaper?
Very well indeed, yes.
That has not had any influence in the course of your campaign.
Looking at the number of my window bills in my constituency, looking at the number of helpers and fine new helpers that I've had throughout the constituency, and incidentally, that's happened to the Labour Party all the way up and down the country. We've got splendid new helpers everywhere and loads of members. I think, Mr. Burnett, you're worrying too much on my account, really. I think I can look after myself.
I'm sure you can, Mr. Silkin. I'm just told that Ladbrokes are now offering 10 to 1 against you as the next Labour Party leader. What do you say to that?
Well, at the age of 90, I may want to do other things. You never know. I thought we had a leader already.
Don't you feel that that leader may now be on his way out?
I can't conceive of any reason why he should, Mr. Burnett, even if you would like him to be.
Oh, no. It's nothing to do with me, Mr. Silkin. It's a question of the voters' decision.
Yes, well, I think the voters' decision will be a very interesting decision. I say, let's just wait a bit. Let's wait till later this evening. Incidentally, listening to Mr. Pryor is very interesting to me. He doesn't believe that there's going to be a landslide, and he's quite right. He's in a marginal seat. He's not yet certain whether he's won it.
Oh, yes, I am. You needn't worry about that, John.
I'm not worrying. I'm delighted either way.
If you get as big a majority as I do, you'll be doing very well.
Good.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. We have some detailed results coming now, and Martin.
Alistair, we can offer you the Reigate result. George Gardner is safely home for the Conservatives there, safely back in Parliament. His majority, though, is down almost 5,000 to 16,000. That seems to be because of a swing to the SDP of 3.9% that pushed them into second place, with Labour losing their deposit. A very good performance from the SDP, on behalf of the SDP there in Reigate. And it seems that that is the only other result we have in detail for you at the moment.
Well, of course, they will be coming in at some speed, won't they? We are now at the moment waiting to see what's happening at Plymouth, Devonport. Dr. David Owen is there. So we are informed. Yes, there he is, behind all the photographers. And this, of course, is the seat where the future of the SDP may be decided. Dr. Owen and his wife arriving hand in hand, and this is the moment. Of course, if Dr. Owen holds this seat, he will be a power in the land and in the Alliance and in the House of Commons, because for many people he's been the man of the match of this election. If he loses, what will the future have? Dr. Owen, of course, has fought for the dockyard in Devonport in his early days. He has, of course, been Foreign Secretary. He took a view about the Falklands War, which was different from that of many people to the left of centre. He spoke firmly then, and in the housing estates where the Navy families live and where the wives waited for their husbands to come back from the Falklands, those words have been remembered. But he has had, as everyone has said, an uphill fight. In the local government elections there just a month ago, the SDP Liberal Alliance came third. But there are friends to meet and greet, and the moment of waiting in public to know what is happening about to come. Well, we'll be going back to Devonport, and we'll hope to have a word with Dr. Owen, not only his count, but what he feels about what's happening. We go now to Wrexham. I think we may have a declaration. Well, it is a recount. That's what they said at Wrexham. They nearly came to it. It's a recount. Now, we're going to have a number of recounts tonight, so we may as well try to make it clear. You can have a recount, of course, between the first two candidates to see who's won. You can also have a recount to find out if a candidate has saved his deposit, just in case he's got 12.5%. Anyway, Jeremy Thompson's there to explain it.
Okay. Well, we might have lost the first past the post in the Derby Declaration Stakes. We've had a cracking three-horse race here between John Marrick of Labour, Martin Thomas of Liberal, standing for his fourth time in the seat, and Kay Wood of Conservative. And as I can tell you at the moment, there is virtually nothing in it. The figures came over the returning officer, Sidney Tongue, the chief executive of Wrexham Mylor Council, has been asked by one of the candidates for a recount. So that's what they're going to do now. So stand by. We'll be back to you in a few minutes when they've resorted the votes, and we'll give you a result then. Back to London.
I hope it is a few minutes, Jeremy. You might have quite a long night if they're feeling that way. Mr. Douglas Hurd, who's the Foreign Office Minister standing in Witney, will not be at his count tonight. We are told that his wife has just been taken to the Radcliffe Hospital, that's in Oxford, and expecting to have a baby. So that's quite a night for Douglas Hurd and his wife. Now a word from the left wing, I think it would be right to say, of the Labour Party, hitherto underrepresented tonight. Ken Livingstone, who's the leader of the GLC, tried to get a seat at Brent East, a candidacy. He was turned down at the very last moment. Jane Corbyn has been speaking to him about how he sees things now.
Mrs Thatcher has got the majority not just to abolish the GLC, but also to take major measures against a whole range of things we're doing in London on fares and job creation and so on. So it's very bad news. I think what it does mean, though, is that we remain well placed to defeat the government at some point in the future. We could have seen ourselves overtaken by the alliance. That has faded away. So it remains the major struggle is between Labour and the Tories.
What went wrong with the Labour campaign?
Well, I think a whole load of small things happened, but I think the reason we lost was we didn't convince ordinary people in this country that our policies could resolve the economic crisis. I think we concentrated far too much on talk of borrowing money, and people know you can't borrow your way out of a crisis. I think it was quite obvious from many of our leaders, such as Peter Shaw, didn't really believe our economic policies would work as well, and that communicated itself to voters. We've got to be much firmer with how we tackle wealth in society and how we take control of the wealth there is to rebuild our economy, and we failed to do that.
What about your own position? There are some that would say that the GLC and you in particular have been rather a thorn in the side of the Labour Party in the last few years. Would you agree with that?
I think we've been more a thorn in the side of the government, and I think what is quite clear is now that the government has such a big majority in Parliament, we aren't going to defeat them in Parliament. And I think over the next 2 years the struggle between the government and the Labour movement will shift outside. It will be the Labour councils that are facing abolition, it will be the trade unions. And I think perhaps the scale of this majority will mean that the limelight passes from Parliament.
How do you see this country in 5 years' time if a Tory government is returned?
I don't think that we are necessarily in a position where Thatcher's government will survive. Having a big majority won't necessarily help that government if there is the sort of total world economic collapse that many economic forecasters are predicting. None of the government's present policies can do anything other than magnify that collapse for Britain. And therefore, I don't assume that this government will last 5 years.
And we've got an important marginal result from the north of England. The Tories have held Pendle, the old Nelson and Colne seat. So that's the first northern marginal to go. Let me give you a quick national summary now and introduce you to another device on our VT80 computer, what we call here the toaster, and you'll now see why. We have 4 results to date. In fact, I think we now have 5 results to date. The Conservative vote is down 1.6%. Labour vote is down 11.2%. The Alliance vote is up 11.8% nationally, and we're forecasting that the Conservatives will have 383 seats in the next Parliament, the Labour Party 227, the Alliance 17, an overall majority for Mrs Thatcher of 116 seats. Let me put it another way for you, how we work that out. There's the racetrack to Westminster. We stick in the winning post and get the majority totted up by amalgamating the opposition. The winning post in the 650 House of Commons, remember, 650-seat House of Commons, is 326. There's Mrs Thatcher's. There's where Mrs Thatcher's overall majority of 116 seats will come from, according to our projections. And let me remind you now that as the results come in, they start to force out of the computer the findings of our exit poll, the poll of people after they actually voted. As the results come in, they get elbowed out, and so shortly we'll be getting projections based on tonight's actual results rather than on what people told us they'd done earlier. Alistair.
I knew that computer would strike back eventually, after all these politicians had said their words.
It never fails to astonish me what this thing can do. down there, it's all churning away.
Good. The Pendle result, of course, will be important when we get the precise figures. That was just a little local scoop, and Gordon Burns had been saying earlier on, of course, that Mr Lee, the Conservative, had been reasonably optimistic of holding it. When we get the details, that, of course, will open up a whole new vista about just how Mrs Thatcher and the Conservatives and the other parties are doing in the north of England, which will be, as Peter was saying, so important in deciding what the final majority will be. But down in the Isle of Wight, that's where there is, well, it's the closest fight between Conservatives and Liberals, because the Liberal sitting member, Mr Stephen Ross, has been challenged by Mrs Virginia Bottomley, and Lucas is there, and they've had a little bit of excitement. Here's her report.
Yes, the count was proceeding very well until someone lost the key to one of the ballot boxes, the box brought in from Newport Youth Centre. There was no choice but to resort to brute force, and they brought in a hacksaw to try and get in by that way. But there was no delay in the actual count, and the result is expected here at about 1:30, though if the figures are as close as last year, we can expect a recount. The returning officer has said he'll consider one if requested, if a margin between candidates is less than 1,000. And these votes will no doubt soon join the others on the table to be counted. And now back to the studio in London.
Well, Anne, you do need locksmiths, don't you, the general elections, provided the right number of ballot boxes is there. That's one of the most important things. The Isle of Wight, of course, was the place that Mrs Thatcher chose to make her very last general election visit. So she certainly attaches importance to the votes being counted there, whether they're locked away or not. Well, now, the official news from Pendle is said to be about a minute away. And we just sneaked in a result there for you. But of course the details will be given to us in just a moment, and those are the ones which I think the parties will be waiting for all across the country, because our early results have come from the racing constituencies in the south of England. The request for a recount has held them up in Wrexham, although that still could be a very interesting one. And it's just the first real hard fact coming from the north of England that's going to decide really whether Mrs. Thatcher is carrying all before her and how far throughout the country, because that has consequences for her. If the north of England is unhappy, if Scotland is unhappy, and if the Conservative majority is based simply upon a very large south of England majority, then that could mean problems. We'll go to Pendle now. Gordon Burns.
And here at Pendle, we are just about to get the declaration. John Lee, you can see there, the Conservative candidate, has already reached the microphone, and the rest of the party are about to come up and join him for the result here at Pendle. John Lee, of course, holds the old seat, which was Nelson and Colne. He had a very tight majority. They always tended to be in the Nelson and Colne majority. He had a majority of 436 at the last election. He took the seat from Labour's Doug Hoyle. And within a few seconds, we shall see, just at the bottom of the steps, in fact, is the Mayor of Pendle, Councillor Mrs. Winifred Crossley, who is going to declare the result. Here she comes up the steps, wearing her chain of office, which I might add her father wore before, in 1935, when he was Mayor of Colne, just up the road a bit from here in Nelson. I think we've got the result coming now.
I, Winifred Crossley, Winifred Crossley, being the returning officer for the Pendle constituency, hereby declare that the votes cast at this election are as follows. Lee, John Robert Louis,
Conservative.
22,739. Lishman, Arthur Gordon,
Liberal,
12,056. Rogers George,
Labour,
16,604.
So the result again, John Lee, 22,739 for Conservatives, George Rogers, Labour, 16,604, Gordon Lishman for Liberal, 12,056. That's John Lee, the winner.
And here in Wrexham, we're just waiting for the returning officer, Sidney Tongue, the Chief Executive, to make the declaration. Here he is, he's just waiting after this recount, which was called for by the Conservatives, apparently. Although I gather that the recount hasn't really changed things very much. Only one vote changed hands in the recount.
This is the result of the Wrexham constituency. I, the undersigned, being the acting returning officer for the constituency above mentioned, hereby give notice that the total number of votes given for each candidate at the election was as follows. Marrick John,
Labour,
16,120. Thomas John Richard,
Plaid Cymru,
1,239. Thomas Martin,
Liberal,
13,974. Wood Cynthia Kay,
Conservative,
15,696, and that the undermentioned person has been duly elected to serve as member for this constituency, i.e. John Marrick.
So Labour hanging on to Wrexham by just a whisker. In fact, the majority was 424. 424 now over to Surrey East and Sarah Hogg.
And here at Surrey East, where the declaration is imminent and the returning officers coming through now.
I hereby declare that at the election held on the 9th day of June 1983 for the East Surrey constituency, the total number of votes given for each candidate at the election was as follows. For Howe, Richard Edward Jeffrey,
Conservative,
27,272. For Liddell, Susan Mary,
Liberal,
11,836. For Pincott, Hugh,
Labour,
4,249.
So there we have the detailed results from Surrey East.
And I do further declare that Richard Edward Jeffrey Howe has been duly elected to serve as Member of Parliament for the said constituency.
And there we have the detailed result for Surrey East. The Chancellor of the Exchequer, Sir Geoffrey Howe, re-elected.
In proposing a vote of thanks to the returning officer, begin by saying on behalf, I'm sure, of all the candidates and all those who have worked in this election, how grateful we are to the returning officer and his staff for the speed and efficiency with which they have completed this work tonight. I should like also to thank the police and other public services who have supervised, to the limited and modest extent necessary in East Surrey, the conduct of this election, for their devotion to duty. I should also like to extend my thanks and congratulations, if I may say so, to my two opponents for the fact that this campaign was conducted, certainly so far as I'm concerned, without any bitterness on their part or on the part of anybody else's. It was a clean fight, democratically conducted in this constituency, and we can all be proud of that. Then I should like to thank the people of East Surrey who have once again recorded their confidence in me and re-elected me as their Member of Parliament, and record also the fact that my percentage of the votes in this election, on a slightly smaller turnout, is precisely the same to the identical decimal point that it was at the last election. There has been a certain regrouping and reshuffling of priorities between my two opponents, but I'm content and very glad and very grateful to those who have worked for me, to all those who have made up my own campaign team, to my agent, to my wife, to the chairman of my association, and to the whole of my team. I extend my warmest thanks. And to the people of East Surrey, I renew my pledge.
Now let's ignore the Surrey East result for a moment and look at one a lot more interesting, the result at Wrexham, where John Marek held the seat for Labour. But look at the share of the poll there in what was a great Labour stronghold in North Wales. Labour 34%, Conservative 33%, Liberal 30%, and the Welsh Nationalists 3%. The change in the share, Labour down 16.1%, the biggest drop in the Labour vote so far anywhere tonight. The Conservatives up 4.9%, and the Liberal up 11.5%, clearly damaging the Labour Party quite a lot, but not enough to cost them the seat to the Conservatives.
But what's happened, Peter, is in Yeovil, your forecast that the Liberals and SDP are doing well. Liberals have taken Yeovil. Paddy Ashdown, he's the Air Force officer who Mr. Steele was talking about, if he ever had to form a cabinet. He's taken it from David Martin. Of course, the previous Conservative MP, he had actually retired, but this is one the Liberals had their eyes on, and they've taken it. Martin?
Well, Alistair, let's very quickly go through those the details of those results we have in so far. In Lee, first of all, Labour have held Lee. Lawrence Cunliffe, the MP, is back safely home in Lee. His majority is actually up to just under 12,500 and a swing his way of 1.2%. In Rotherham, Stanley Crowther, the MP, is back home. His majority down slightly to just under 12,000. We're going straight to Blind Eye Gwent. See what Mr. Foot's doing down there.
And Mr. Foot's car is just pulled up in front of the sports centre at Ebervale. A small group cheering him. He's surrounded by police and Fleet Street photographers. He's been watching the early results, I know, on television at his agent's home in Ebervale, just a couple of miles away. He's coming up now.
Right, stop here, please. Yes. Okay. Yes. Up he goes.
But do you agree the first results are not good for Labour?
No, we'll have plenty of time to comment later, and I'm sure the best thing is the most sensible thing. Let's wait a bit, and then we'll comment later. We'll have
16% fall in Wrexham.
Have you heard the Wrexham result?
I did indeed.
Right,
16% Labour fall.
Let's just wait until we have a few more results, then we'll have plenty of time to comment properly. That's the way to do it.
But there are surely clear signs that you're losing ground to the Alliance.
I think the way to do it, is to wait and see when we've got a few more results in. That's the time to comment, and we'll have plenty of time to do it, and that's the sensible way to do it, and that's the best way to go.
Don't the polls look to be right?
And so Mr. Foot goes on his way. No doubt he is now formulating what he really will say once he sees the scale of the election result. But the good news for the Liberal-SDP alliance is that their efforts have now come up with their first success of the night in Yeovil in the West Country. Now, Mrs. Shirley Williams in Crosby, she has quite a fight on her hands there, so we're told. Mrs. Williams, what's your reaction so far?
I think it's quite clear that the alliance is doing a great deal better than the computers predicted. We're not cutting only into the Labour vote, though that is, I think, very serious for Labour. We're also beginning to cut into the Conservative vote, and I don't believe that the predictions of a landslide Conservative majority are now going to be borne out. I would add one other thing, and that is that it's quite clear that in the southern half of the country, the Labour Party is rapidly disappearing as any effective opposition party at all. And even in the north, as the Wrexham results showed, the Labour Party, I believe, is beginning to have very serious inroads made into it. I think what, if I may say so, the results that you're showing make clearer than ever before is the absolutely disastrously unfair nature of an electoral system that can actually predict fewer votes for the alliance, fewer seats for the alliance than are currently held by it, at a time when the alliance is steadily surging forward against both the old parties, though much more against Labour than against the Conservatives.
And that was a point we did expect you to make, Mrs. Williams, and also,
but it's
of course,
true, actually.
well, we are informed unofficially that Mr. Jenkins appears to be doing not too badly in Glasgow Hill Head, and may indeed hold that seat. Now, that's only unofficial. I wonder if you've got a word for us about your own seat in Crosby.
Well, I think that Roy will unquestionably hold Glasgow Hill Head. I would put my own seat as being roughly third in the order of difficulty among the gang of four, and so Roy might hold his and I might lose mine. But certainly I have to say that if effort and enthusiasm and high morale can win a seat, we will win Crosby tonight, because the efforts of my own supporters have been absolutely miraculous.
Now, what about the future? Mr. Healy was saying in Leeds that Mrs. Thatcher's majority was not, as you have said, anything like a landslide. And would you expect the alliance in future by-elections to have perhaps a better chance than it's had in this general election?
Yes, I think the result of this general election is going to be better than has been predicted at the beginning of the night. I think we will clearly come out with a pretty reasonable result. Though, again, I have to say, if the electoral system were different, it would be a spectacular result. It won't be because of the electoral system handicap. But I believe that we will pick up by-election after by-election, because I think that the Conservatives, once returned to power, will drift inevitably into having to take all sorts of actions in respect of public expenditure cuts, in respect of not carrying out various, as it were, implicit promises that seem to have been made. And I think that the electorate will turn against them, alas, they will turn against them a year too late.
One thing, Mrs. Williams, what do you think of the future now of Liberals and Social Democrats? Mr. Steele has talked about a rethinking. What are you going to be thinking about?
Well, I did, fortunately for me, see Mr. Steele's interview, and he talked only, I think, in terms of a rethinking when, all the results are in, because it is a bit early to predict what they will finally be, especially given very substantial regional variations. I think that the rethinking is not going to be about the alliance. I think the alliance is here to last. I think the rethinking will only be about how we act as what I suspect after tonight will prove to be the moral opposition when we cannot be the technical opposition. I still believe we're going to end up with more votes than Labour, and the first results seem to me to clearly bear out that possibility.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Williams. We'll hope to come back to you later.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And while we were talking to Mrs. Williams, of course, we saw the news that the Conservatives had gained Nuneaton. That was a seat that Mr. Leslie Huckfield, who was for some time on Labour's national executive, decided not to fight. Wisely, as it turned out. He then tried to get a seat in Wigan and was turned back there, so he is out of Parliament anyway. But for the Conservatives to take Nuneaton means that something is happening in the country tonight of quite considerable proportions, and it does suggest that Mrs. Thatcher may now be making headway. That's the first seat that we've had changing hands in the Midlands. She may in fact be making headway there now, despite the high unemployment. Now, Martin.
Alistair, the results are really starting to flow now. In Salford East, Stan Orme, the industry spokesman, he is safely home there, but his majority down 2,000 and a swing to the Conservatives of 1.3%. In Barnsley East, Terry Patchett, sponsored by the NUM, he's home there, but the majority down 5,000 for Labour and a swing to the Liberals of 5.1%, pushing them into second place. In Barnsley West and Penistone, that's Scargill country, Arthur Scargill country, the Labour majority is down 4,000 to 10,000, a swing to the Conservatives of 3.4%. That's Alan Mackay, a former miner back home. In Wolverhampton South, I beg your pardon, in Oldham Central and Royton, James Lamond is safely back home for Labour. His majority, though, almost halved to 3,000 and a swing to the Conservatives of 2.9%. In Wolverhampton South East, Nicholas Edwards is home for Labour, and he was fighting against the only working miner standing as a Conservative candidate, but he hasn't made it, and Labour's majority is down 3,500 to 5,000 with a swing to the Conservatives of 4.9%. And I think we can move on from Wolverhampton South East to perhaps take a look at how the Conservatives are doing. And we find that Michael Newbert is back home in Romford. He has held that seat, but his majority is down 7,000 to 10,500, and a swing to the Liberals, pushing them into second place of 7.6%. Alistair.
Martin, we have the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Sir Geoffrey Howe, after his successful count in Surrey. Sir Geoffrey, your comments on the night so far. Aren't the alliance parties doing pretty well against you in the south of England?
Well, I haven't noticed it in my own result, which is the only one I know of, in fact. My own percentage was exactly the same as last time.
Well, Sir Geoffrey,
the alliance have advanced at the expense of the Labour Party in my constituency, which is what one would have expected.
That's to your credit, Sir Geoffrey. The alliance have taken Yeovil in the West Country.
That is one of the seats that we knew we were going to have to defend very hard, because in fact the local authority there, as you know, has been under alliance control, I think, since the last local elections. So there has been a very hard fight fought there by our own candidate. I know he fought extremely well, and that must be a sad loss if that hasn't indeed happened.
What are your expectations now, Sir Geoffrey? I mean, do you expect Mrs. Thatcher to give you a ring on the phone? Has she done that already?
Both Mrs. Thatcher and I think, are still immured in our own constituency. Certainly I am. And nobody could get me on the phone even if they wanted to.
I thought you might have heard from your next-door neighbour by now.
Well, no, we're scattered to opposite corners of Greater London, you must remember. I shall be returning to London later on this evening. But I don't think you'll find that things begin to happen with that kind of speed. We have to go through the night. We have to see how the results work out. We can be cautiously optimistic on the strength of what your computer is telling us. And I'm certainly well content with my own result here.
Sir Geoffrey, thank you very much. Well, now, Mr. Penhaligon, who has joined us, and I must make clear, Mr. Penhaligon, we did enjoy your joke. I must make clear now, you are the Liberal. And you must be quite pleased to be the Liberal, considering the way that you are running in the southwest and southeast.
Well, the southwest is looking very good. To get within about 6,000 at Torquay, knowing West Country politics as I do, is nothing short of a miracle. And to win Yeovil, of course, is really quite fantastic and represents years of work. And indeed, I think one of the things that is going to come across tonight with our results is that where the work has really been done over a long period and the candidate has really been able to establish himself, then they're the seats we are indeed most likely to win. And Yeovil was a classic of that definition.
Now, we also have here Mr. Michael Heseltine, the Secretary for Defence. As you know, Mr. Heseltine, we're going out to the British forces in Germany tonight. They're watching ITN. How do you count it so far? I mean, you have a seat in the south of England. Are you surprised that the Alliance are doing so well?
Well, I don't think they are. I think what is happening is the Labour Party are doing extraordinarily badly, because the seats that I've seen in the south, whether it's the southeast or the southwest, are the responsibility of a collapse in the Labour vote. And that Labour vote isn't actually making the whole switch to the Conservative Party to get away from the Labour Party. It's going to the Liberal or the Alliance Party, largely the Liberals, I think, in the cases we've seen. So it isn't that there's a great surge of enthusiasm to the SDP or the Liberal Party. It is just a decision not to support the Labour Party. That's what's taking place in the south. But looking on the results at large, as far as I can see, I think the results look as though they're going to be somewhere between the sort of forecasts that you and the BBC are making, which show a very substantial Conservative majority.
Of over 100 or so.
Well, whatever, you know.
Now, Mrs. Shirley-Williams has been making the point in Crosby that given the numbers of votes, however they've been attracted by the Alliance, for them to end up with what we're still projecting, probably under 20 seats, she's saying that is a scandal, that is wrong. Is the Conservative Party, like the Labour Party, just going to shrug its shoulders and say too bad?
Well, I think I would take the same view as Shirley-Williams always took in government. When she had the power to change all these things, as a Labour cabinet minister, she thought it was a very desirable system. Now that she's left the Labour Party, she wants to change the system. But that's not a terribly credible sort of change of posture. And no party that's been in a real position of power has wanted to change the system. It's only the fringe parties, the minority parties, that see it as a desirable switch. My own view is that you can argue the case both ways. You can argue for a different system of proportional representation. You can argue for our own system. The fact is, our system delivers a firm government. It delivers a system of government that works over a period of time. And looking across the Western European experience, I don't think there's any argument to suggest that they get a better result or a more stable and permanent result than we do.
So you're quite happy with a system where somebody can get a quarter of the nation's support and in fact land up in the House of Commons. Let's take your prediction has been absolutely correct for a moment. With 16 or 17 MPs, you as a Democrat who supports a democracy, who believes the people should have an influence on Parliament, are quite satisfied with a system which allows a quarter of the nation to vote for a political argument, however you might choose to deride it, and that results in 17 members out of a 630 Parliament. You, the Democrat, think that's okay?
Well, I think, you see, that you overstate the case. I don't think that people are voting positively for the Liberal Party's policies. I must tell you, I don't think they are. I think what you've seen in the South East tonight is quite clearly a protest against the Labour Party. It's Labour voters looking at the present left-wing Labour manifesto and say, we don't want to do with that. They're not saying we want the Liberal policies, because quite frankly, no one knows what the Liberal policies are.
What right have you got?
What we're actually seeing is a very clear
value
decision by the British people that they want the re-election of the Conservative government. There'll always be those who don't in any given circumstance, and they're splitting between Labour and Liberal at the moment, apparently more to the Liberals. But it's not a positive vote for Liberal policies, and it really isn't, I think, realistic to pretend that it is.
I can see you as King of the Manor 150 years ago, supporting the limited franchise of about 10% of this nation because it gave you power. I think it's absolute outrage, and I defy you to find another case in the whole democratic West where a party has got 8 million votes.
When you were talking about 100 years ago, your party had power and it didn't change the system.
There's never been a result in Britain.
That's the reality of it, isn't it?
This is a debate which is going to go on for quite some time, not only here, but just one thing, Mr. Heseltine. The polls were, or some polls at least, right up to this morning, were projecting a Conservative victory by about 200 votes. Do you think that the voters today have decided to try to tame Mrs. Thatcher?
Well, I think that is to sort of misrepresent the situation, because what the polls today are indicating is they want a very substantial increase in the Conservative majority. So that is the real world. That's what's actually going to happen. Now, if you say, did the people swing slightly back from the very substantial projections of a day or so ago, it may just be. We don't really know that. You can argue there was a beginning of a drift upwards in the Alliance support of 2 or 3 days ago, because the British people might have said, well, this is a fair system, this is a parliamentary democracy. If we might be broadly sympathetic to a Conservative government, we don't want the most enormous Conservative majority, so somehow or other a few of them have aimed off a bit. That's what looks as though it may have happened, but the national judgment is for a very substantial degree of support for a firm and positive and long-term Conservative government.
Thank you very much. Now Martin has some results.
Yes, indeed, Alistair. And let's look first at Nuneaton. A very interesting result there. Leslie Huckfield obviously took the right decision in not fighting the seat, as the boundary changes did push it towards the Conservatives. And Lewis Stevens, a local councillor, is in there in what was basically a contest of new candidates. His majority just under 4,500 and a swing to the Conservatives of 5.8% in Nuneaton. We can give you details of an alliance seat, which I think is Yeovil. Yes, Paddy Ashdown is in there. Yeovil, an interesting seat because it lost 14,000 voters under the boundary changes, and many of those were Conservatives. There was a swing to the Liberals there of 11.9% in Yeovil.
Martin, I'm told there's a recount in Great Grimsby. Now, that's Austin Mitchell's seat, and if there's a recount there, that must mean that the swing is continuing towards Mrs. Thatcher in Yorkshire and Humberside. Now, at Chelmsford, where, of course, the Liberals are pressing very hard, Mr. Norman St. John Stevens, we'll go now to Trevor MacDonald.
Thank you, Alistair. Well, I'm not too sure whether you can just see Mr. Norman St. John Stevens and his agent there. He arrived here about 10 minutes ago, and this is going to be a very tough fight for him. All the indications are that it is going to be very, very close indeed. Mr. St. John Stevens and his agent appeared very confident earlier, but tonight somehow that confidence has evaporated to some extent. Not entirely due to the fact that our poll, our computer predictions say that Mrs. Thatcher is going to have majority. I see it now flashing up on the screen of 126, but it also says that Chelmsford is one of the seats that the Conservatives could lose. And of course the reason is, one of the reasons is that the local council here has been controlled by the Alliance. 6 seats in this year's local elections went from the Conservatives, a net gain of 6 seats, to the Liberals. 1 from the Labour also went that way. So it's going to be a very, very tough fight indeed for Mr. St. John Stevens. And it will also be a very disappointment if the Alliance fail to get this one, because if they are to get anywhere, if they're to make any kind of progress in the country, then this is one of the seats which the Alliance must hold. So the result is still expected in about an hour's time. We hope to bring that to you as soon as it's declared. But now, back to the studio.
And let me give you a quick recap on the state of the parties. With 26 results in, the Conservatives have won 13 seats, the Labour Party 11, the Alliance won, that gain at Yeovil, and others 0. What it does for our forecast is, we project that on the basis of the results that we've had tonight now, and forget all our exit poll data, the Conservatives should have 388 seats in the next House of Commons, Labour 217, the Alliance 22, of which 19 will be Liberals, we forecast, and only 3 SDP, and others 23, of which 17 will be Northern Ireland MPs, who don't know their results until tomorrow. If we put in the winning post and add up the combined opposition, we forecast now a Conservative overall majority of 126 seats in the new Parliament. The national share of the vote on the results, the 27 results so far declared, the Conservatives are taking 42%, Labour 31%, the Alliance 27%. Now, our exit poll, incidentally, forecast 42%, 28%, 26%. But there's still a lot of results to go, and who knows, in the end, we might have hit it absolutely on the button for the second successive general election. Alistair.
Yes, Peter, I think at Wrexham, though, the Labour victor, Mr. Marrick, is there. We'll hear what he's got to say to Jeremy Thompson. No, we've got a result from Leyton now. Leyton in East London, Brian McGee's seat. He went over to the SDP waiting for that result. I'm told it's imminent.
Election, Leyton constituency. The votes cast at this election are as follows. Cohen, Harry Michael. Labour. 16,504. 16504. McGee, Brian. SDP. 9,448. 9448. Nielsen Hansen, Voldemar Tor, 11,988.
So Labour have regained Leyton. Brian McGee, who defected to the SDP and didn't get any help from the Liberals, has failed to hold the seat.
And I hereby declare that Harry Michael Cohen is duly elected for the said constituency.
So Brian McGee, who went to the SDP from the Labour Party after holding this seat, has failed to hold it in this election. He got no help at all from the Liberal Party.
And that's the first of the SDP defectors to be defeated tonight. And let's look at what happened in Leyton, the share of the vote. Labour polled 44%, Conservative 32%, and the SDP 25%. That really is a bad result for the SDP. Many people expected the alliance to hold on there because they've been putting up a good performance in the 1982 local elections. The change in the share of the vote, Labour's was down 9.4%, the Conservatives down 6.9%, the SDP up 16.3%, but this is a pretty safe sort of seat. And the swing from the other parties to the SDP was nowhere near big enough to help Brian McGee to hold on. There's some very interesting swing figures now by region in the UK. In the north, the Labour are being squeezed by a 1.8 swing to the Conservatives. In the Midlands, it's 4.2, the squeeze on Labour, the 4.2% swing to the Conservatives. And in the south, it's 5.1, the squeeze on Labour, a 5.1 swing to the Conservatives in the south. If we look at the national share of the vote so far tonight, again, Conservatives taking 42%, Labour 30%, Alliance 27%, and others 1%. The forecast again, Conservatives 381 seats, Labour 224, Alliance 22, of which 19 were forecasting would be Liberal, 3 SDP and 23 others. And add up the combined opposition, put in the winning post, we're projecting now an overall majority for the Conservatives of 112 seats. So our forecast is going up and down a bit. We started with 116, trimmed it to 108, upped it to 126. We're now saying 112, Alistair.
I think if you stay the right side of 100, Mrs. Thatcher will probably forgive you, Peter.
Well,
still, 42% of the total poll is not a high number for a government return to power. Certainly not one which had been subjected to the sort of forecasting that some of the newspapers and polls have been giving the Conservatives earlier on. We should just mention that Mr. Michael Meacher, who is one of the coming young men on the left wing of the Labour Party and associate of Mr. Tony Benn, has been returned in Oldham West. I think when the Tories hoped that the swing was really going to go their way, that was one that they had had their eyes on. And Westminster North, of course, on the Conservative side, that was very marginal last time. It's really rather a nice name for Paddington, although they've thrown in a bit of St John's Wood. Not short of a bob or two there, and they have returned the Conservative in that marginal, Mr. Wheeler. Now, down at the National Liberal Club, which has been the campaign headquarters for the Liberals and is there tonight, Eleanor Goodman. Eleanor, how are people taking it there?
Well, Brian McGee's failure to hold Leyton was obviously a disappointment, but a great cheer went up when the Liberals managed to win Yeovil, for that's one they've been working at for a long time. But until then, it looked as if the story here tonight would be one of frustration with the Liberals or the Alliance getting a lot of second places, but not many first. But that Yeovil results cheered people up, and it's encouraged people to think that you can't necessarily translate the national share of the vote into a precise number of seats. And now the guesses range from anything from 15 seats to as many as 50, and a few people are even talking in real mold-breaking terms about 80 perhaps, but I must say there aren't that many of those around now. So back to you now.
Eleanor is rather sceptical about mould breaking tonight. However,
well, Alistair, I think we can just belt through a few more results if we're very quick. The results are really starting to flow now. The peak period is in the next half hour or so. In Barnsley Central, Roy Mason, the former Under-Secretary of State for Ulster, former Secretary of State for Ulster, he is safely home there. His majority up 2,000 to 14,000. But look at that turnout, lowish, 66%, and a swing to Labour of 3% in Barnsley Central. In Eccles, Lewis Carter-Jones, 19 years in Parliament, signing on for another 5. His majority, though, down 4,000 to 6,000, and a swing to the Conservatives of 3.